Good evening and welcome to In Conversation, which is a joint live streamed event held between LabourList and the Fabian Society. My name's Emma Burnell and I am the editor of LabourList. And I don't think delighted is a strong enough word for how I feel about welcoming our guest today. Former Labour leader, current Labour peer, European Commissioner in between times, the one, the only, Neil Kinnock. Neil, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
We're so pleased to have you as a friend of LabourList.
That's a pleasure too, yes.
Thank you. So obviously I did a lot of preparation for this and I frankly could ask you questions probably for the rest of my life, but I will try to keep it to an hour. But you've had a very varied career, and I think given our audience today, I want to sort of focus on the political aspects of that. But even within that, you sort of started off very rebellious under Wilson and Callaghan, very sort of firebrand of the left, then became very loyalist under Michael Foot, and then became the Labour leader and had to discipline your own rebels. And now you're a Labour peer and a former leader. Throughout that journey, what would you say is your sort of political lodestone?
I'm a democratic socialist, so that sort of guides all my attitudes to policy, organisation, even some associations and friendships. And I suppose that basic reality of being a democratic socialist means that at just about all times and all opportunities, you're looking for means of prompting or taking accountable collective action for individual freedom. I mean, that's basically what it boils down to. I can give you a longer definition, but that's been, if you like, the lodestone. But of course, it's had to be applied in, as you suggest, very different circumstances. And I have to say, in my own defense, I wasn't consciously a rebel. What I was very, very committed to doing from day one was standing up for my constituents and my patch. And of course, by standing up for my constituents, that implied a wider commitment to working class people. And it meant that when I bumped into the government policies that prompted some divergence, I tried to mitigate that. I rebelled, as it were, quite reluctantly, and you say frequently, but that was almost entirely limited to two issues. One was the minority government's public expenditure program, which I thought was fundamentally wrong. And as it happens, as the full records became available years afterwards, even Dennis Healy, who was then the Chancellor, and ferociously critical of myself and my colleagues, said, "You were right.
Yeah.
You didn't know you were right, you bugger," he said, but you were right. And I that was very gratifying for him to say that. And the other issue, of course, was the form of devolution being offered by the Callaghan government. And because Harold had gone by then. And I knew it was against the interests of my constituents, but more specifically, if we were going to have decentralization, which I strongly favored and favor, then it should apply everywhere. And by applying it only to Scotland and Wales, I called it sore thumb devolution.
Yeah.
And it was a response, if people were honest, to some very bad results in literally a few by-elections. And I thought it was a ridiculous overreaction, and they were going about it in the wrong way. And as it happens, in the case of my constituents, it will work against them. So I repeatedly voted against the government and organized against the government. I led the Labour No campaign, which we won in Wales by 9-1 in my constituency and 4-1 across the country. But I mean, I even did that reluctantly, but under criticism with greater enthusiasm. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, I get the sense that criticising you isn't the best way to change your mind.
Well, it depends who it is. I mean, occasionally, Glenys was my best critic.
Fair.
Because she was very, very much to the point. It wasn't frequent, I have to say. I suppose either the product of or the cause of a very happy marriage, but she was damn good at it. But I almost picked my friends on the basis of their willingness to make effective criticism when it was due, because you are usually your own best judge, usually, but not always. So it's just as well to have candid, loyal comrades. And I had a few CLCs.
I mean, I think that's the role that LabourList very much tries to play for the party.
Yeah, and you hit right from the start. You've hit the theme very well, because you're not excessively critical. What you say is rational and detailed and factual, and it's the least that could be expected or should be expected in a democratic party.
Absolutely. I mean, you. Reading about your sort of storied career, you had quite a combative style sometimes in politics, and certainly.
Well, they all kept getting in the way. You know? It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault.
And I think that discussions about, that was at the time, it was seen as one of your greatest strengths. It was part of what people loved about you. One of the reasons when you were going out into CLPs, you were seen as the champion, our fighter. Mm-hmm. But discussion about politics and being combative in politics has changed somewhat in light of sort of more recent events. What do you think about that? Was that the right approach for the right time? Or was it just a kind of emotional response?
Well, there's a lot more than emotion. I mean, it's no good picking fights for the sake of it.
Yeah.
Or because you're in a bad temper that day. I mean, it's a waste of time. I mean, the conduct of controversies now is much nastier. Much more personal, and in many ways less political. Certainly in my view, and I guess this could be an old man talking, but I try to avoid that if I can. It's an exercise in very bad temper, which is sometimes authentic, but usually organized and poisonous. So I can't say how glad that I am that there was no social media when I was actively engaged in representing people or standing up for causes on a daily basis, because it would have been vile. Yeah. And of course...
I mean, the media were vile enough to you as it was.
Well, they were bad, but it's part of the territory. I mean, you could whinge about the unfairness forever, and that gets you absolutely nowhere.
Absolutely,
so you take it, and when you can, you hand it back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the critiques that's come through a lot in your writing is, and it reminded me what you just said, people who are angry for a gesture.
Yeah.
Gesture politics.
Affectation.
To look like the big man or woman, possibly. Rather than actually having something to say.
Yes.
I mean, and it seems that there is, one of the key critiques that I think runs. So one of the things that I really picked out is pragmatic socialism. And I think it's both of those words at once, as much socialism as we can manage in a democracy.
I never thought about it quite like that. But, I mean, the Labour Party... if it isn't seeking to make a broad appeal on its own general terms, then it's a hobby. And in order to seek and gain power to do things and make the country, the world conditions better, then you're going to have to adapt. And that's the essence of pragmatism, really. The thing is, of course, what makes it usable instead of an impediment, an excuse for inactivity, which sometimes I've seen pragmatism used for that purpose.
Yeah.
But if you're going to use it as an effective analytic and practical tool, then you've got to have deep convictions, rooted convictions, and not be afraid of compromise. Recognizing that just about all progress is gradual, is incremental. And if you can get half a loaf or even a quarter of a loaf and live to come back for the next bit, that's the way in which advances are built. My greatest political hero, Aaron Bevan, fundamentally understood that and said it in terms in his book, his only book, In Place of Fear. And he said pretty much that was the essence of democratic socialism. And he had no time, I'm quoting him exactly now, no time for those who would seek, and he was speaking about nationalization as an instance of their ambition, who had nationalized everything. They are purists and therefore impotent. Therefore is the important word in that. But at the moment I read it, really, when I was about 14, I guess, I knew what the fella meant. And that's, it's not a holy text, but it has guided me, and much else that he said have guided me through 70 years now of active politics. 70 years.
Well, I've got 51 because I was in the paper at 3 weeks old as Labour's newest member, so I'm not that far behind you.
That's a good start.
So I've got a question here from Susan Vincent. If people do want to send questions in, please do email questions@LabourList.org. We will be taking them for as long throughout the recording as we can. Susan asks, can you tell us what you feel is your greatest unfulfilled wish in your political career? Given the kind of what we've just been talking about as achieving as much as you can within the circumstance.
There's only one answer to that, and that's not winning at least one election to get a Labour government. In fact, I was asked way back in, I think about maybe 83, 84, by George Thomas in a programme that he was doing on BBC Wales about ambition. And in answering it, I realised that I'd never had an ambition, a real aspiration for achievement until I became Labour leader. And the ambition then was to win an election, sadly unfulfilled.
So it's really interesting. You said the ambition is to win an election. You didn't say the ambition was to become Prime Minister. And I think there's probably a difference in the way that you frame that.
Well,
obviously it would have meant you became Prime Minister.
Sure, but it's about more than one bloke or woman getting this job at the head of the table, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That makes a big difference, but it's about winning elections for our cause. And then there are some automatic consequences that you have to deal with,
Yeah, absolutely. Would you... So one of the kind of things I think that in reading you've sort of tussled with is how do you have democratic conversations within a single party and make sure that those are robust, that we're challenging each other without that descending into factionalism and people just fighting because they've picked a side?
It's very, very difficult. And if people or groups start out with fixed stances and their policy attitudes, for instance, or their alignments with individuals in the party or titles have taken on an almost religious devotion, getting productive exchange can be difficult. If people always, understanding the meaning of comradeship, for instance, they take each other seriously, but not earnestly. And they will recognize that the purpose of engaging in this dialogue, it can never be a monologue, although some people have difficulty understanding that, is to get a better outcome. So you're looking, if you're both well motivated, it's a pretty big if sometimes, then you are seeking a result that is acceptable to both and will be better than either of you have committed yourselves to, declared before. Now, it's all a bit theoretical. Everybody, I think, who's been engaged in political activity understands really that's all fundamental. If there's no basis for discussion, then despite the readiness, at least on one part, to listen, to heed, and to respond, and to try and do the argument justice. But if there's nothing there, don't waste your time. Don't argue just for the sake of it, or because somebody gets on your bloody nerves. I mean, that's always a temptation. Yeah. But it's, and it isn't one that I've always avoided, I have to admit. But, I mean, don't waste your time. Go and have a pint or go to the cinema or make love or something. But use your time much more productively.
Fair enough. That's some excellent advice.
Yeah.
Looking at sort of factionalism in the party, the soft left. Now, that term...
I wish people wouldn't use that term.
Me too. It's a terrible, imprecise term, which is why I want to ask you.
Yeah.
Because essentially what we think of as the modern soft left, the splitting of the left, really kind of coalesced around the 1981 deputy leadership race,
yes.
which is a sentence you can only say about the Labour Party, really.
Yes, quite.
But I do find the term soft left very imprecise because it can be people who are really very close to the hard left and people who are very, very close to the sort of progressive modernite. So what does it mean to you, who kind of was there at the birth?
The people who qualify for what became known as a convenience of an enemy press, that has to be remembered.
Fair.
Are the people who qualify, as far as I'm concerned, are better called the sensible left, the rational left,
But
the
one might even say the pragmatic left.
the genuine left, the pragmatic left. I mean, they're flattering adjectives in a way, of course, and they imply praise.
You don't give your own faction unflattering ones, do you?
Well, the important thing is they're not a faction. That's the important thing. They can be organized, and that's crucially important.
Can they? Because I've met them.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to a memorial for Phil Wallace tomorrow, Wednesday. Sorry. And that guy could organize.
Oh, yeah.
And he was seriously of the left, but not the daft left. And he was pretty firm, but he hadn't been transformed into thick granite, impenetrable granite. I mean, he was a great guy. And
we actually published a lovely piece about Phil
beautiful.
The other day.
Yeah, and it was a justifiable tribute. But I can name lots of other people. Tom Sawyer, who died last year, epitomized it. This is a guy who moved from very substantial support for himself and his union for Ben, and simply by listening and experience on the National Executive Committee, and then in the investigation of militant in Liverpool, realized that he was going up a cul-de-sac politically, and that things had to change in order to make progress and to broaden Labour's appeal. And if there was a soft left at the time, he was either the secretary or the chairman. But it was produced initially simply to distinguish those of us who could not be called of the right in any shape or form from the people who fancied themselves as the purest hard cases.
The Derek Hatton.
Well, no, Hatton was way beyond that. I mean, Hatton wasn't even really militant. I mean, he was a member of militant, but he was a chancer. Yeah. I mean, and certainly not in the same league as, say, Ted Grant or Peter Taft, who were wrong, utterly wrong, but serious.
Yeah.
But Hatton, he was latest in a long line of spibs. And he had colleagues with him who were utterly sincere. And in a sense, it was a shame that they had to be tossed, but they were guilty under the terms of the Labour Party constitution. So it was a lazy, convenient label given to us probably by the Express or the Mail, the Sun or something like that. I'm not ashamed of the term pragmatic left, sensible left, realistic left. It's a word people say I overuse, realistic, but damn, you can't do anything without it.
No, absolutely, 100%. So you are one of the few politicians who speeches are quoted back to them quite frequently, I imagine.
I'm astounded. There are people who remember my speeches a hell of a lot more clearly and easily than I do. And that's not just age.
Well, I'm sure some of them are in this room with us today.
Well, I was in a pub just before Christmas, and a fellow in his 30s, maybe in his late 20s, came up and literally started...
A Labour Council.
No, he didn't even recite that bit. He recited the bit about the enabling state.
Oh, wow. Well, good for him.
And his mates were joking, they're going to say that at his wedding, they said. I mean, that is quite amazing, yeah.
But it's not, I mean, that is the one that I think most people can probably tell you a little bit of. But there's, three speeches.
It was in Technicolor.
It was very much in Technicolor, absolutely. But before that, you had the beautiful speech at the 1983 election about, which I can tell you, having watched it again over the weekend, I cried at, which is if Thatcher wins, I warn you not to be ordinary. I mean, what an incredible turn of phrase. And then again, later on, there was the first Kinnock in 1,000 Generations, a speech so good it got nicked by a potential future American president.
Yeah. No accounting for taste, is there? The I Warn You speech, I wrote in the back of the car, Glenys driving me down the M4, brand new car, which I smashed up a few weeks later and luckily escaped with my life. But she drove this brand new car, which we bought at second-hand prices. It's a long, complicated story, and it was great. I mean, I had 2,000 quid off it because...
Can you come and negotiate next time I'm buying?
It had been bought by a main dealer for the Glamorgan Fire Brigade, and they turned up, they bought 6 of them, and the chief of the fire brigade turns up and says, they know what we ordered. So the main dealer says, yes, he's a pal of mine, Ken. And yes, they are. No, they're not. These are deluxes. We ordered the basics. And they refused to take them. So Ken was then left with a task, because of course the logbook had been filled in.
Yeah.
So they'd already been one owner.
Right, so they're technically second-hand, even if they've not done a mile.
It was 32 miles on the clock. I mean, it was...
God, it's a dream.
Anyway, there was a fault with it, and that's why I smashed up. But anyway, that's a separate story. But Glenys is driving down the M4, obeying the speed limit, which she was very good at. most of the time. And I'm sitting in the back with a clipboard that I kept in the car. It's a habit I developed when I worked for the Workers' Education Association, because I used to record my mileage in order to be able to claim my car allowance.
Yeah.
And I kept that up. I kept that up for as long as I had car allowances, including as an MP.
And do you think your start at the WEA and as a lecturer helped you to become such a good orator and such a good writer of speeches that would retain people's attention?
Well, in the WEA, first of all, the students knew no more than the tutor, especially in that generation, because I had lots of students who'd been through the war, merchant service, who'd been growing up in the 30s, who'd just about seen everything there was to see and knew, in some ways, just about all there was to know. And you said lecturer, he's never a lecturer. You can't lecture in an adult works education class. I had some big classes, and when you've got very big classes, it's difficult to kick off with a conversation or to catch up on some reading that they've done or inaugurate a seminar, really. That's what it boils down to. So you do tend to talk maybe for 10 minutes in order to get engagement, and then people start to melt a bit. But, I mean, I had a class the night before the Aberfan disaster in the Social Democratic Club in Aberfan, which was a founding institution in the 1890s of the Social Democratic Federation of Martin Hindman. Hindman opened this club in the village of Aberfan in the Merthyr Valley. And there were 62 people there the night before the disaster. And I resumed the classes, though they weren't really that. They were conversations about 3 weeks after the disaster, because obviously every family in the village had been directly affected by the disaster,
And education's clearly a passion for you, and I think always has been.
Yeah, it's the key.
When was the last time you took a class?
I've done a couple of university seminars, but in the last year, but I can't say I've done a class. I mean, one of the reasons I was delighted to get the WEA job directly after leaving university was my dream job, because I would have been utterly useless as a school teacher. Glenys was a brilliant, natural-born school teacher. And when we were doing teaching practice, I was president of the Students' Union, because I did my teaching diploma in order to be president, because until I secured the changes, the reform, we didn't have a sabbatical president in the Cardiff Union. And my successors were all sabbatical, including Kia's wife, by the way, Vicky. She's 30 years after me, she was president of the union. Anyway, I'm chatting away, that's all beside the point. But
that's the joy of these conversations, right?
Yes, quite absolutely. But I got this dream job, but when I was doing teaching practice, the kids were running rings around me, 8-year-olds in a quite deprived area of Cardiff. And Glenys, one Friday night, she said, you're very down. I said, oh, those kids are killing me. She said, they're 8 years of age. Yeah. And I said, yeah, that's why
the problem.
And she said, I bet you're going in and calling all the girls love and patting the boys on the head and talking about football all the time. I said, well, what else do you do? I mean, these kids, a lot of them haven't even had breakfast. So somehow we've got to get them fed before we can do anything. And she said, and she was in a very similar area of Cardiff. And she said, no, you're not helping them, you know. You've got to be a complete bastard for the first 4 or 5 days. Then when you've got them really under control, you can start loving them. And so when I became the secondary temporary teacher doing my teaching practice, I was an utter bastard for the first 4 or 5 days in Cardiff's last secondary modern school. So you can imagine what it was like in Roath Park. And I then got on with the boys famously. Unfortunately, the very lazy head teacher allowed me not just to teach English and history, he allowed me to be the PE teacher as well. So I was teaching them rugby.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of tackling classes. And by the end of the 3 or 4 weeks, they were a great bunch of kids. They really were. And even in a month, I could see good changes, you know. And I guess I could have done that for a while, but I could never have made a career about it. God, I was just too nice to the kids. And that's no good.
So I want to bring in a question. We've actually got 2 questions from Paul Hodgkins. So I'm going to smoosh the 2, which is a technical term.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned gradualism and incremental progress, but the problem with that is it often goes unmissed by the electorate. And that may be what's happening in terms of what's happening in the government right now.
Yeah.
So what more could or should Labour be doing to ensure that that progress is recognised by the electorate and also to embed it so that it can't be undone?
Paul's got a very, very, very good point. And the answer is all Labour governments should do what Clem's government did and have people who every single week, in an age before social media, with very little TV, only radio really, and newspapers, tell people what the government was doing and why they were doing it. And when you had people who get on their feet like Ernie Bevin or Nye Bevan or Morrison or Cripps or a whole bundle of them, I mean, Wilson, Gateskill, would tell not just their constituents, but substantial public meetings, I suppose the equivalent of podcasts in a sense, all the time, what they were doing and why they were doing it. So that by 1951, 6 years in government, real setback in the 1950 general election, but that Attlee government never lost a by-election. It's quite extraordinary. And in the 51 election, they got hundreds of thousands more votes than the Tories, but lost because of first past the post. Now, I used to have discussions with Tony and Gordon from about 1999 on, saying, you've got to tell people what you're doing, why you're doing it, because nobody else will, that's the first thing. We live in a hostile media environment with very few dependable means of delivering our message. Very, very few. The Mirror, occasionally The Guardian, more frequently the Financial Times. Funny enough, good on them. But it does need repeating continually, communicating clearly, fluently, sympathetically. And I actually said to them, and they were immensely successful members of a very effective government that didn't get the credit. And I actually said to them, see, what's going to happen is if people start to take it for granted, believe that it was their due and it was coming anyway. I mean, the huge investments in education and health and so on, the Sure Start, the massive reduction in pension and child poverty, all those things were arriving, being appreciated, used, but people were not induced to understand that it was the consequence of having a Labour government applying its serious progressive purposes, its values. So what's going to happen is somebody's going to come along sounding and looking a bit like Tony out of central casting and give the impression that everything will continue regardless of a change of government. And damn it, that was before I even knew of the existence of David Cameron. And I'm not being wise after the event. There was a very serious case that I was putting on far more than one occasion. And it's something that really prompts concern now. Because not only is the communication system of the Labour government almost absent, I'm sure there are people striving like hell. It's not working. It's got to be massively improved, and we've got to discover social media. I know there are people working like hell on that, but it's not coming through. My own grandchildren, who are confirmed Labour supporters, Labour members actually, tell me it's not coming through at all. And they're worried about it. And of course, quite a lot of the good things that have been done since July 2024 are in any case obscured by stupid, wrong, un-Labour things that were done, which people remember very clearly because they felt seriously, desperately in some cases, let down. The withdrawal of the winter fuel allowance, for instance, the delay in getting rid of the two-child benefit cap, and a few other things, as well as the nonsense, which of course plays at crescendo all the time by hostile media. You can expect it.
Absolutely.
So when somebody doesn't pay a tax or gets a free gift, what makes that happen, I do not comprehend. And I'm not Simon Simple or Jack Pure, but I mean, I don't understand it really. And it's what we don't do. We are Labour. We don't do that. So, and if it happens by accident, which it can, then it's got to be explained and shown that there was no malignant intention.
No malice. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we've talked about Tony and Gordon and you giving them communications advice.
Well, it wasn't advice. It was urging, I think, is slightly nearer the tone that I was using. Yeah.
I mean, many attribute the sort of original sort of establishment of what became New Labour to 1987 and the changes that you made to the organisation of the party and its communications and the emphasis that you put on communications. And it was more about that presentation and organisation than I think about a new policy change, which I think came later. Is that fair? And why did it matter so much that you reorganised the party and the comms?
I suppose in some ways I was instructed partly by instinct. Martin Westlake, my biographer and
excellent
now
book.
Dear friend, yeah, it is good.
We now have a signed copy by Lord Kinnock, so one of our friends will be happy to win that in the future.
Quick commercial. Yeah.
Always be selling.
Well, Martin picked up and said to me, you've always been a reformer. And I said, well, not consciously, sounds a bit staid. And he, like saying, you were a Puritan. You'll never be a cavalier. You're not even really a roundhead. But I said, well, he said, look, when you were president of the Students' Union, you changed everything, which I did. And then you become the candidate in Berkeley, and you changed the party. And they had a bit of a shock, but in the end, they agreed with it. They were wonderful people. And then he said, you become elected leader and you start to change every damn thing. And then you become European Commissioner and have a couple of nice years, fulfilling years, enjoyable years indeed, it must be said, as Transport Commissioner, the job I wanted. And then you become Vice President with your primary job of reforming the institution. And I suppose he's right. So that might be instinctive, But in any case, there was no alternative. In 1983, the party, in every respect, was in a hell of a mess. Financially, organizationally, in employment terms, but most importantly, of course, organizationally, and of ultimate, predominant importance, policy. So that had been changed. Now, I knew that some of the changes to get us back in the red, or near the red, for instance, and some of the changes in the rules, which are just basic things, could be accomplished quite quickly. I knew that any big changes in the rules would have to be done in heat. And so it turned out. And then, as the policy changes were vital, I also knew they were going to take a hell of a long time, because quite a lot of the commitments in policy terms had, for very good reasons at the outset, grown roots, almost religious roots. And so people were going to have to be argued, debated out of their stance to see that they could sustain their socialism, and it wasn't a betrayal to adopt a more, I'll use the word, pragmatic approach to disarmament, to nationalization, to trade union laws, to council house sales. There's quite a long list. Unfortunately, I wish it had been necessary to make it much, much shorter. But it couldn't be, because we were so divergent from the general sentiment, the aspirations and the needs of huge majorities of the British people. So you can't say, like Bertolt Brecht, change the electorate. You've got to change the party. And so that's what we got on with. So I wasn't consciously starting a new wave. And I mean, I'm very pleased that Tony, or John Smith, first of all, and then Tony, could inherit a party that was intact, that was self-disciplined, which is a great advantage, and had adopted resolutely the policy changes we'd made. But the new Labour concept was his and probably Peter Mandelson's. And as a catchline, we are new. We're nearly 100 years old, but we are new in our thinking and refreshed ideas. And all. That's great. That's terrific. I used to go around saying, look, if it's not new, it's not Labour. I mean, Keir Hardie worked on the same basis. So did MacDonald when he was writing his very fine socialist essays. Certainly true of Attlee. Definitely true of Wilson. I mean, you go through it. If it's not new, it's not Labour. So that was okay. But then it became a brand and not just an adjective with a lowercase n. And could, like all branded goods, demonstrated that the shelf life.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of as a comms person, that was the problem I had with calling anything new, is it ages it almost immediately.
Yeah, that's true, yes.
I can see using it with a smaller case N. It's the uppercase that is gonna do that to anything. So we've got a number of policy questions that have come in from people.
I don't make it any longer, so
well, but you're very much allowed opinions on it. I'm aware that you're making a speech later this week on.
Well, it's not a speech;
the EU.
It's a 5-minute press conference thing.
So I will ask you to maybe give us a kind of slight preview on that.
I'm
We've
not
got
doing
questions
that because the subject about which will the event
you don't want to
activity which we're launching is embargoed. So
that's fair enough. Well, in the modern parlance, no spoilers then.
No spoilers. No spoilers. Yes.
Okay. So one of the other things that we've had a number of questions on is PR.
Yes. Yeah.
And not the kind we were just talking about.
No, quite. Yes.
So Malcolm Smith has asked, do you think Labour will have PR at the next general election? as have other people have raised that too. So
Yes.
do you think that's something that Labour will offer in a manifesto?
I would be very happy if they did, especially if they were offering the opportunity for us eventually to adopt a form of proportional or more proportional representation that allowed for single-member constituencies, which I think is vital.
Absolutely.
In terms of,
I mean, that's always been my...
yeah, the contract between the representative.
I want my MP to have walked down my street. It's just as simple as that.
Yeah, that's right. And it's very, very important. And that allows a constituency to ensure that as a second preference, if necessary, a majority have supported the person that they're sending to Parliament or to the Council or to the Senate or the Scottish Parliament. So I would very much like it if we were to include that. I very much doubt that it'll be there. Because it's a real problem for governments that are in power to concede that there was something wrong with the system that got them there. Yeah. So that I know in the government and certainly in Parliament, there are quite a lot of people, maybe even a majority of the PLP, I have no way of knowing, that favour more proportional electoral systems, as well as several other constitutional changes that need to accompany it in the interests of renewing and refreshing our democracy in the 21st century. But I don't think that they're going to publicly embrace it or adopt it as a manifesto policy. Now, the last thing I want, of course, is another dose of opposition in order to bring it about. So what I would like is that we form the next government after a successful general election and then have the confidence to really undertake a proper constitutional convention or even a royal commission, time limited, to give consideration to the operation of the British unwritten constitution and see what improvements need to be made. I believe that a more proportional electoral system is one of the improvements that's crucial.
So I want to ask some softer questions towards the end, but I'm going to, before I do that, I might bring up the one of the biggest sort of areas that you had to negotiate as leader, which I think is also something similar that Keir Starmer is experiencing at the moment. We've got a question in here from Theo Michael, which is, what did you feel about your relationship with the unions and the Cooperative Party was like when you were leader, and what do you think it's currently like, the relationship between Labour, the Co-op and the unions?
Well, I'm not really in a position to make a judgment, which is what an opinion would be about current arrangements. I had a very close relationship with the Co-op Party, who used to make their contributions and were always warmly welcomed, actually. I can't think of any exceptions to that. With the unions, I had a strong trade union background myself.
Absolutely.
In the WEA, but also because of personal relationships with the NUM, especially the South Wales National Union of Mine Workers, my own union, the Transport and General Workers. And as things developed, the AU, GMB, that when they started to trust me after I got elected leader, couldn't be. I mean, John Edmonds is still a very, very good friend. I had strong personal relationships. I also had a network, which we built up over the few years when I was leader, around the country, of politically active trade unionists who were on the regional executives and so on, and were day-to-day active. Some of them also in local government, but all of them either senior lay representatives, conveners of shop stewards, or district or regional officers. And they had my phone number. And if I needed to know anything, they would tell me. It was a great intelligence network. Second to none. I mean, there were some CLP members who weren't trade union officials in that network as well. But it did give me a sense of the real sentiments, the movements in opinion, the attitudes being adopted, the people coming forward, either to be encouraged or to be discouraged. And the great thing is, the only qualification for being part of that network really was that you wouldn't shout about it and that you would tell me the truth. Not always pleasant to hear, but I mean, that's why you ask people to tell you the truth.
Absolutely.
So I had a very, very close relationship. The only union of any significant size that consistently voted against the changes I introduced was my own union. Not under Moss Evans, who was a great pal. Not only because he was Welsh, but he's a good guy.
With a name like Moss Evans.
Yeah. But, I mean, lovely guy, Ron Todd, for instance. Really sweet guy with aspirations of poetry and a really sweet guy. But with the General Executive Council, that was pretty much out of control.
Yeah.
Big change from my comrade, Jack Jones, the man who put me on the parliamentary list. Great man. After I got selected, he wouldn't have done it before. You get the seat first, then we'll support you. Right? But I took some delight, I have to confess, of saying to my friend, Ron, and he was a good friend, in 1989, when he came in and said, "Sorry, comrade, the union can't support your changes in unilateral disarm." And I stood on my desk in my office. I must be crazy. Stood on my desk in my office, and Ron's sipping his tea, and I go, "Ron, I don't care." And there was a word in between the I don't and care. And a very, very, and in fact, soon I came crashing into the room thinking there was something wrong. And Ron just sat there with his cup of tea in his hand. He didn't know. He thought, should I call a doctor? I mean, but I took some delight in that because I had the votes stacked up, and it was terrific. And so it was a silly infantile moment.
Look, we've all got to find our fun where we can.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one union leader that you didn't mention there. And
Scargill.
Yeah.
Yeah, he wasn't a union leader. He was a narcissistic individual.
I mean, reading about...
He's still alive.
Reading about what happened in the miners' strike and the betrayal, I think, as you would see it, and I think many would, of the miners themselves by their leadership. I think
Well, not the leadership. Mick McGarchy, Peter Heathfield and others, Emlyn Williams from South Wales are all sound as a bell. Great guys. Terry Thomas, marvellous. But they were never fully informed of what Arthur Scargill was doing or thinking. All he kept doing during that strike was pumping out every week to mass meetings and lodge meetings and all over the place that the strike would be won if they held fast, and that the coal stocks were dwindling to nothing and the government was in crisis. And I was saying to my lodge members in my own constituency, I had the power station reports from T&G members who were giving me their stockpile reports. And I was giving them to the boys in my constituency. And everybody knew that he was lying. But because of superhuman loyalty and solidarity, it wasn't a matter of betrayal. It was abuse of the most extraordinary fidelity, commitment to the cause, to the union, and their own pride. And that wasn't just the men working in the industry. It was their wives and communities.
Oh, absolutely.
Their children as well.
Yeah.
And all of that was being misled and misrepresented. And people were finding themselves, including a member of my own family, who sadly died a few weeks ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And he was a coal miner and then a coke worker in the NUM. And he was a big, handy lad, very good rugby player. So he'd be on a picket line, and the police, depending where they were from and how they were motivated, and there was a huge divergence across the police forces. I mean, the Monmouthshire police in the county of Monmouthshire, my county, I don't think they made a single arrest.
Right.
And they were...
Not South Yorkshire, then.
No, exactly. And not the Metropolitan either. But even then, there were divergences within the Met. I mean, there were district commanders who ensured that nobody took aggressive action. And there were other ones who said, Philly boots, lads.
Yeah.
I mean, so it depended so much on the capabilities of individual commanders and leaders, as well as the squad attitude with different police forces. So, I mean, nothing was common.
Yeah.
And it diverged hugely. But you stick a big boy like John up on the picket line and they're going to pick on him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which they did.
Yeah. So I'm sadly, I genuinely could have gone on for several more hours, but we are coming towards the end. So I've got a couple of questions.
Which I will try to respond to.
So we've
briefly.
got a question from Lusungu Nkoma. I was wondering if you ever watched Spitting Image.
Yes.
And what you thought of their impersonation of you.
Which, it wasn't bad, actually. And it was kinder than what they did to the Tories.
Oh, what they did to Major was, I mean, vicious.
Yeah, I mean,
quietly vicious, which is the worst kind.
I mean, On Your Bike got a rough deal as well. I'm not saying it was undeserved.
Right, I've got family who live in Chingford, so...
I was going to be very noble and gentlemanly then, but anyway, the only real problem that emanated from it was the fact that every Monday morning, my kids in their early teens had to go to their local comprehensive. From about Form 3 or year, whatever it is, Steve, who's a capable bloke, wasn't really bothered. But there wasn't serious bullying, but their lives were made miserable because everybody had seen their old man falling down on the beach in Brighton the night before.
I mean, yeah, they did put that in the credits,
Yeah. But that was the only damage done. Mind, it also has to be said, is about the only damn thing that people remember about it.
Have you ever met your puppet?
No, Roy Hattersley bought his, and I must say I've got an egg cup, and I also got a jug. There was an auction by the Yorkshire. I did a fundraiser at the Yorkshire Labour Party, Yorkshire and Humberside, 3-4 weeks ago, and they had this terrific Spitting Image Toby jug.
Oh wow!
So I actually.
I'm amazed that's not worth a fortune.
Well,
I'd look it up on eBay if I were you.
I mean, it wasn't, wasn't exactly cheap. But I couldn't resist it.
Oh yeah.
I certainly couldn't let anybody else have it. So I've got that and some drawings. That's about it.
So one question that our staff has asked me to ask you, if you were to recommend one book that people should read to get to start a grounding in political education, what would it be? R.H. Tawney, Richard Tawney's Essays on Equality.
It's available from the Open University now. I've got an original edition. I've also got about 5 other copies scattered all over the place. But there is no better grounding in a rational approach to socialism. I mean, Tony was a First World War hero, a teacher, one of the founders of the Workers' Educational Association. If people can get a booklet, which is Essays on Equality by R.H. Toney, then they should get that. I mean, I don't think it's been in print for 30, 40 years. But there is an essay in that called We Mean Freedom, which he wrote in 1941 for the New Yorker. And it defines, I mean, if people read it and think, I've seen this before, it's because they've read George Orwell's Lion and the Unicorn,
right,
which says almost the same things with almost as much, well, just as much style and verve and conviction. If you want to, if you want an interesting introduction to British socialism, Lion and the Unicorn takes some beating.
Oh, absolutely.
Or just about anything by George Orwell.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
But R.H. Toney, I would firmly recommend.
Fantastic. Neil, I cannot tell you what a genuine honour and pleasure this has been. Thank you so much for joining us for this In Conversation. Please do keep in contact. You are a friend of LabourList after all.
I am a friend of LabourList. Next commercial.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, yeah, okay.
And speaking of, I would just like to let our viewers know that our next event will be with Baroness Aisha Hazarika, who is a broadcaster, writer, stand-up comedian, all the things. So we'll be having a very interesting conversation.
Neil Kinnock's a wonderful woman.
Absolutely wonderful woman. So please do join us for that. Thank you again to the Fabian Society for their brilliant hosting and for doing this in partnership with us. And just once again, Neil, thank you so much for spending this evening with us.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks.